Ben Erwin, obviously excited to be here. My journey with Encore started about 8.5 years ago, and I fell in love with the events business, all because of the people, and I think that's what we're going to talk a little bit about, but I found this community of service-oriented, hospitality-minded, adrenaline junkies, and that resonated with me, and it's been a fun ride, so excited to talk today.
Awesome. Ellen? Hi, everybody. I'm Ellen Davis. I am at the U.S. Travel Association, where I lead industry engagement and business strategy. I've only been at U.S. Travel since February, but prior to that, I spent 17 years at the National Retail Federation and about 3 years at the Consumer Brands Association. So grew up in the trade association space. Many of you are familiar, and happy to be here today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marguerite Eastwood. I am the Chief HR Officer at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is a trade association that supports all businesses. Hopefully, many of you are familiar with us. I've only been at the Chamber of Commerce for 18 months. Prior to that, I had an HR career in larger organizations, and I'm probably the only one in the room today that has not worked in the events industry for many years.
Welcome.
It's great to be here. I learned a lot today.
Great. Thank you, Marguerite. So I know for those of you that were in the session a couple of hours ago, Rick talked a little bit about new attendees and kind of what the next generation of folks coming up are looking for in terms of demographics. They want excitement, they want diversity, sustainability, DEI, career growth. They want to, have a seat at the table, so to speak. So it should be no different that the people that we're hiring want these same things coming into our events, companies, and organizations. So I think it's going to be a really exciting panel, and thank you all again for being here. Ben, we'll start with you from the CEO perspective. How do you think companies should be thinking about their workforce post-pandemic, right? So.
Yeah, look, I think there's an argument that for a CEO, the most important job in their organizations right now is what they're doing to develop, attract, and retain talent. And certainly in the service business, which I put, all of certainly events in hospitality. And I think the reality of that is because we more and more, regardless of the organization you're a part of, your competitive advantage is like dictated by talent. And kind of having grown up maybe outside this industry, but kind of studying a lot of different businesses, you've watched through history kind of what companies or organizations compete on change, right? There was a time where your greatest assets were hard assets, manufacturing plants. There was a time where it was all around like operating disciplines. And you think about some of the financial, kind of engineering and structuring that was really important. And then you got into this world around, kind of intellectual property. And I truly believe where we find ourselves today, like all of that takes a backseat to what are you doing to develop talent and attract the best talent in whatever field you're in. And so as a leader, if that's not front of mind, I think you need to rethink kind of what that time allocation looks like. And all of that's just been made more important or more pronounced coming out of the pandemic. And you think about it, the generational changes, which we've talked a lot about, kind of today. The people in the workforce today are going to work for more organizations than all of our, kind of parents' generations did. The element of work from home or hybrid work means we're now competing against potential kind of employers in much larger geographies than when, hey, they could really only, work for organizations in that town. And so I think the competition for talent is fierce, and you find yourself in a world where organizations will create value based on the quality of talent that they have. And the organizations that have the best talent will win. That is, first and foremost, I think, for any leader, a true statement today. And so it's all around what are you doing to engage that workforce? And I think that's really where you get into some of the things that are front of mind, kind of for me and in our organization, but I think for any leader around how do you create your community as a place that, your teams or your employees want to belong? Because if they feel like they belong, they're going to be more engaged. And if they're more engaged, they're going to produce better outcomes. And that is just backed up by fact. If you look at a study that Qualtrics did last year, and they spent a lot of time looking at like employee engagement in organizations that are winning. If you just look at the sense of belonging that team members or employees feel to their organization, those that are, comfortable that they belong in their community are going to be 91% engaged in their organization. If they don't feel like they belong, they're going to be 20% engaged in the organization. That is a huge single determinant for how engaged your workforce is and the outcomes you're going to get. So I think your question is like, where should it be on a CEO's agenda? I think it needs to be top of the table. And I think as a result, you're going to see CEOs' profiles change from 50, 75 years ago, where they were the best operators in the business, to maybe 30, 40 years ago when they were the best sellers in the organization, 20 years ago where they were the best financial mind in the organization. I think you're going to see future CEOs be chief human resource officers or people that are focused on creating a culture that people want to belong to.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And I think it's incumbent upon us as being part of the events industry to also, project the positivity of this industry, right? Because you are going up against a lot of the tech companies, people coming out of school, they don't necessarily know about our industry right away, so it's incumbent upon us to educate them. But that's excellent.
Look, just one thing I think for the events industry, and I've said this on other stages, like I think it's a huge opportunity for event professionals, because how are you going to create that culture? I think events have an opportunity to play a really important role for organizations in a bigger way than they historically have, and I think it's an opportunity for the industry to be on the front of what is or what should be really important to every organization.
Excellent, thank you. So Ellen, we know the travel industry is struggling with sort of unprecedented workforce crisis coming out of the pandemic. Ben mentioned how businesses are thinking about their workforce, but the travel industry struggles are sort of unique. So can you elaborate on some of the issues at play and the ways that they are having an impact on the leisure and hospitality business?
Sure. We don't need to talk about the U.S. unemployment rate and employment situation. I think you all know that. We've got about 10 million openings in the U.S. right now. The unemployment rate continues to be really low, and so it's a race for talent, as Ben said. People have lots of options, both in trade associations and in Washington, and also, of course, in leisure and hospitality. So I'd like to talk a little bit about travel specifically, because I think that is an area where folks who are in the event space and planning meetings just need to recognize some of the challenges happening in the industry and be aware of some of what the headwinds are that we're facing today. The kind of Cliff's Notes version is travel has rebounded in a lot of ways. The industry has bounced back. We're seeing a lot of growth in leisure travel, a ton of pent-up demand that people couldn't go anywhere for a couple of years and saying, now I'm taking that family vacation. I'm excited to go have this big reunion. I've been not able to feel comfortable getting on a plane for a while, so they're going out and doing things. We also see meetings coming back. A lot of the group business is returning. We are not seeing as much of a return yet to business transient, which the kind of everyday business traveler that existed before the pandemic, because the hybrid world has made all of us a little ambidextrous, and we're okay now hopping on Zoom, where before we would have needed to hop on a plane. And then international has been a little bit slow to rebound with things like visa wait times and vaccine requirements and other things that kept people from coming to the U.S. So the travel industry, though, has rebounded. The industry is very healthy and very strong. The challenge is, and this was the comment that Sam was making that I mentioned last night at dinner, was the industry is trying to rebound with one hand tied behind its back, because the travel industry employed about 9 million people directly in 2020. We lost 3 million people that year due to all of what we went through, and we've only brought back 2 million. So there's a 1 million employee gap right now in travel. I came from retail. I think the same misperceptions are true in retail as in travel, which is just go hire them. It's people. This is easy. The challenge is in the service industry, it's not as simple as just hiring people. A lot of these are soft skills that are tough to train. A lot of these positions are highly skilled. You can't decide to be a pilot overnight. We lost a lot of them during the pandemic. So the industry has rebounded from an economic standpoint, hasn't rebounded from a worker standpoint, and not just anybody can take these jobs. And so what we're seeing, and what you might be seeing as you're having events and you're even traveling on your own, is that this workforce shortage is impacting hours, it's impacting services, and it's impacting the quality of service. So for example, at some hotels, you're not getting daily housekeeping or daily turn-down service. That started off as a COVID issue, but now I think it's a workforce issue. At airports, we're seeing huge lines, specifically at Customs and Border Protection, because we don't have enough agents. So people are choosing other countries versus ours because they don't want to stand in a line for 4 hours. Theme parks, for example, who can't find enough teenage workers are finding themselves, needing to navigate which rides get opened and which rides don't, because you need somebody to be able to, manage those attractions. And then airlines. I mentioned, the pilot shortage. We saw a lot of people retire during COVID. We saw a lot of pilots opt out of the commercial travel business. And due to understandable requirements and the amount of time it takes, this is a long process to get more pilots. So you can't get more planes until you get more pilots. The planes are there, the pilots aren't. So all of these types of things you're hearing about in your own complexities of travel, people's travel experiences, et cetera, are really stemming from many of the workforce challenges that just haven't rebounded for our industry yet. So we've got a lot of work to do, and it's going to take time. And I think that's one of the things that really is a focal point for our industry at the moment.
Yeah, Ellen, you make a great point. I mean, that coupled with the fact that you mentioned before that folks are now choosing, maybe before they used to travel to a few events at a time, now they're choosing to maybe go to 1 or 2, or they're choosing to make their decisions more last minute. And then, that coupled with all of the travel issues exacerbates the situation. So thank you, that's very interesting. Marguerite, I wanted you to explain a little about the Liberty program at the Chamber of Commerce, and maybe talk about some services that the small businesses can benefit from?
Yeah. So to build on what Ellen said about the workforce challenge, we are missing 1.97 million workers now compared to February of 2020. So that's 1.97 people who are not in the workforce. We have a low labor force participation rate of 62.6%. And so that is sort of building this workforce shortage that we have. And I'm sure many of you in the audience are dealing with that in your attraction and retention of your workforce. One of the things we're doing at the Chamber is we have a pithy campaign that that we've put together called Liberty. It stands for the Legal Immigration and Border Enforcement Reform This Year campaign. So what the purpose of the campaign is to secure the borders and to modernize the legal immigration system. There are many of our members and many of you are really suffering because we don't have enough workers, and there are lots of ways that we can bring more workers into in the workforce. So some of the things that we've done are we've written a letter to Congress, and we're backed by 430 other organizations in addition to the Chamber, where we've asked for action this year. Any action. For example, increasing the annual quotas for employment-based visas. Another thing that we're asking for is expanding the scope of essential worker programs and allowing employers to meet temporary labor needs in non-seasonal jobs. Another thing we're asking for is creating some new visa options for students, for entrepreneurs, for other critical talent that's hard to source in the US. So these are a few of the things that the Chamber is doing to improve the workforce shortage issue. Another thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about is resources that we have for small businesses. So we have an organization that's called CO, and and if we move to the next slide.
Yeah, you know what? Why don't we hold that until after the polling?
Okay.
Because I do want to go over CO with you.
Okay,
yeah, for
great.
sure. Yeah. No, thank you, Marguerite. That's awesome. We know there's a lot of very important work being done by the Chamber of Commerce, so we appreciate that. I do want to take a quick moment to involve everyone here in some polling, so please get out your app from earlier. We're going to ask you a few questions and then go through the answers, really trying to understand staffing at each of your organizations. So the first question, what's your current staffing level now, post-pandemic? Are you fully staffed? Are you down still? 10%, 20%, more than 20%? And then we'll give that a minute or two. There are some more questions following in the app, so we'll be going through each of them. But let's take a look. Let's see if we have answers yet for that first question. Okay, so 82% of the folks are roughly either fully staffed or only down 10%. Does that kind of jive with Ben, what you're seeing? And
Yeah, look,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's probably a little more optimistic than I think many organizations feel maybe on the
Yeah.
services side. If I think about, I sit on U.S. Travel CEO Roundtable with many of the hotel and airline CEOs, and I think we're probably feeling a bit more pain than is reflected here. It's definitely getting better, but I think the work that you mentioned that the Chamber's doing, kind of the priorities around how do we make sure that the workforce is as healthy, I think most organizations probably fall more in that B category in terms of the peers I talked to.
great. So the second question, have you returned to the office? Okay, hold on. Current hiring freeze, do we have that next? Does anyone have a current hiring freeze? Is that on there? Hold on. Okay. Okay, so have you returned to the office? Yes, full-time, 4 days a week, 3 days a week, 2, 1, or fully remote? Let's see what the answers to that are. And I can say access intelligence, because we are looking for that highly valued client talent from folks coming in, that we are not forcing anyone to come back into the office. We are requesting people to come in at least 1 or 2 days a week. We would love that. We've asked managers to sort of build meetings around that time, that time that they're in together. But it's not mandated, and that's on purpose, because we want to attract the talent, and we did so well being fully remote during the pandemic, and we saw that folks really got a lot done. So for us, it wasn't a deal breaker. But let's see. Yeah, it looks like most people are, between 2 and 3 days a week. And then, fully remote, so 28% fully remote. Are you seeing that in the government, Marguerite? Are people back in the office more?
So we're a trade association for the business community. We're about 2 to 3 days per week in the office, so we're sort of right in that midpoint there. Yeah.
And then Ellen,
We're 3 days required.
Yeah.
And I guess I'd make 2 points here. One, the federal government's not back to work, which is a really big priority. That's not fair to say. The federal government is not back to the office.
Yeah.
I think we sometimes confuse working with being in an office, and it's just an important distinction that does have a difference. The federal government's not back to the office, and that impacts a lot. It impacts the D.C. downtown community. It impacts business travel. Yep. It impacts the way that travel is perceived. And so that's been a big focal point for us, is really talking about the benefits of being in person. And as someone who represents an industry where a majority of people who work in leisure and hospitality don't have the luxury of a hybrid environment, we feel like it's important to be in the office. Retailers should be, retail employees can't work from home, all of them. Hotel employees, for sure, airline pilots. So for us, it was important to be back and leverage all the benefits of that, but also send the signal that it's important to be important to recognize the upside of that too.
And you've got people traveling all over the country all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, look, we're in the business of face-to-face, so we're in the office and we're in the hotels.
Excellent, great. Okay, last question. Does your organization have a current hiring freeze, yes or no? We will see what the answers to that are. No, okay, good. Yep. So the last one, we asked about what the question was, what's everyone's biggest worry? And we asked that to be one-word answers. So this will be really interesting to see what kinds of results we have from that. And if we have those results, you can go ahead and put them up. Okay, so Encore, these are all in like different places. continuous turnover, retention, yep, well, that's what we're talking about today. So talent, retention, quality, burnout, that's a big one, right? Burnout, I think, you know, a lot of that has to do with people sort of merging work and life together for so many years during the pandemic, and then kind of coming out of it and realizing that, you know, it's the lines are blurred now. So, but yeah, what does the panel think? Ben, do you have thoughts on what you're seeing here?
Look, I'm not surprised. I mean, I think maybe the one element that we haven't talked about, burnout. I mean, I think, you know, when you have organizations that are under-resourced, you ask your teams to do a lot of things. And it's amazing, especially in the industry we're all a part of, like, people are motivated to be heroes. You don't want to ask your teams to have to be heroes every day. And so I think that burnout piece is an important part of how do you make something sustainable. So I was... you know, I didn't want to see it, but I'm not surprised to see it.
Yeah. Anyone else? Marguerite, any?
I noticed the word quality up there, and I was curious about quality. Like, I want to know more. Maybe there's a thought that if people aren't in the office, there isn't quality, or maybe there's a thought that there's higher quality work when you actually have quiet time, when you can think on your own at home, and then when you go into the office, you're convening. So you're making use of that time with others?
Yeah. Good point.
I would just, you know, echo the burnout element. I think is twofold for people who, you know, navigated the pandemic when others in their organization were let go, that many of them are now kind of carrying all of the challenges that came with that, and also feeling this tremendous obligation to onboard new people who are coming in. So there's this extra weight that a lot of, you know, really talented employees who survived the pandemic and moved companies forward are carrying as it relates to making sure that their new colleagues feel like they're, you know, getting up to speed. And it feels like there's a weight is the only thing that I can think of that really kind of seems to permeate with a lot of folks that went through some of the challenges that you all and the travel industry and other really impacted industries did during the pandemic.
I think you make a good point. A lot of us that have been in the workforce for many years, you sort of take for granted the fact that you always had mentors in the office, you had senior people you could learn from. I think a lot of the folks coming out of school now, you know, they might have only learned about their organizational culture, senior leadership, anything from Zoom, right? So I think that's been a real challenge as well, to kind of get people feeling like they're a part of this community and culture. So that's another big issue for sure that I know we'll get into. Ellen, I know in addition to your own association and retaining staff, like what other things are you aware of that is working for retention? Travel patterns, post-pandemic, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of the companies that we work with, you know, their workforce, they're at least, you know, the corporate workforce in a lot of cases has the opportunity for flexibility and to be hybrid. You know, people who are, as I mentioned, people who are working in hotels and at theme parks don't necessarily. So there's a little bit of cognitive dissonance, I think, that companies are trying to navigate. So you are seeing, but I do think balance seems to be the word that everybody's trying to figure out of how do they provide flexibility and balance to employees and those who need to be at work, you know, every day that they're getting paid. It's about how do we provide clarity, how do we enroll in schedule, how do we provide flexibility, how do we provide growth opportunities. For us as an organization that's got a mandatory return 3 days a week, it's been about articulating the why. This isn't just about making you sit in your car for an hour back and forth to work and sitting in a cubicle and not talking to anybody. It's about articulating the benefits to the culture, the benefits to collaboration. It's also about articulating, for us, the growth opportunities that come with that. I think a lot of people who graduated during the pandemic were disadvantaged because they spent a long time working from home and they missed out on the impromptu meeting or happy hour or, you know, one-on-one with somebody who came into the office in a way that both disadvantaged them and prevented companies from seeing where their next leaders were coming from. So for us, it's been about articulating the benefits of being in person, why we think that's important, and then also creating an environment where people want to come to work. So we've gotten rid of our reception desk and we've put couches and high top tables and areas there to collaborate. We're looking for new office space, and the chamber has has invested a lot in new office space and renovations, I know. But so for us, it's been a little bit about how we create an environment where people want to come in, because a lot of folks got comfortable working from home.
Yeah, and don't forget the free food aspect. So I was telling someone at dinner, you wouldn't believe what a few little croissants and a continental breakfast will do for the engagement or morale of your employees, especially when they're younger and they're more junior. They just graduated from college. We have a lot of people like that in our organization. We have a little, continental breakfast on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They are coming in droves on Tuesdays and Thursdays to get that continental breakfast.
Do you also have people bring in like Tupperware to take home with them? Because that's the whole thing for us too. They can also eat on Wednesdays and Fridays if they do that. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, we started that too. We now have like free lunch like all the time. Of course, it's not lunch that works with my diet, so I can't eat it. But I mean, they have subs, they have salads, all this free food, and we're still probably only getting 10% of the folks in on the days that they do come in. But yeah, Ben, why don't you elaborate on that? You had to hire, close to 10,000 people to restaff. So, how have you been working on retention strategies?
Yeah, it's been a focus of ours, no doubt. So we were incredibly excited when the world woke up, but I think it woke up faster than any of us really could have predicted. And I think there's maybe two things that I just talk about, and obviously our teams have done a lot of amazing work. But I think, the first thing for us started kind of in the depths of the pandemic, and we were really intentional about what we wanted to be about when the world did wake up, and we didn't know when it would take place, but we knew it would. And I think as a team, we kind of sat down and said, look, we have this once in a hopeful lifetime opportunity to define what we want to be when we grow up, and let's be really specific about the role that our teams are going to have in our organization. And so, certainly we had, kind of a priority around customer centricity, but there was also this piece of how do we make this a great place to work for all, and what are all the things we want to do about it? And we were deliberate, like how do we bring purpose to what we're doing? And not just, kind of we all share this intrinsic feeling of the purpose of what we do, but let's be very specific around, kind of the purpose at Encore to connect and inspire people, and what does that mean, and how do we, articulate our team member value proposition around their own growth and development, and I talked about belonging, and so I think it was just using this time to be, kind of document what did we want it to be about if you worked for Encore, and so, having something that if you got to hire 10,000 people, it's not going to all be conversations with, me or one of our leaders. So how do you embed that kind of purpose and culture and mindset in the organization? And then, this idea around, kind of belonging and how do we make this an organization that is a great place to work for everyone? And like, how do we attract all the diversity of talent that's in the industry so that we are the academy company? And so I think it's just being really clear around those things on the attraction side. And our teams did an amazing job. And it's always a bit sobering to have this conversation in a room where we have all of our amazing team members sitting in the back working this event. So they're all kind of giving me thumbs up and thumbs down as I talk. So you guys can look to them for kind of a truth meter on this. But it was around like, how do we create something that they want to believe in, that they want to be a part of?
Absolutely.
And then the second thing is, and we talked a little bit about it, like, it's a technical workforce that we have. So how do you develop those teams? Like, it's one thing to get them here, but how do you now put them in a place to be successful? And that, I would say, is even harder than attracting the talent in the first place.
Absolutely.
And so, what we're spending, and I think organizations and many parts of the industry are spending on just like, how do we develop our talent? How are we really specific on training? Because you don't have kind of the benefit of time. So our organization right now has this like barbell experience set. Half of our organization has been in the business, more than 5 years. Average is about 10 years of tenure. Half our organization is less than 12 months in the organization.
Wow.
So how do you bring that to life in a services business? Like, you've got to rethink your training programs. You've got to accelerate that development. I can't tell our partners that, just give me 3 years and we'll be in a good place. And so I think it's those two things, right? How do you create something people believe in, they want to be a part of? And that gets to the purpose and the why and like the joy we all get from our jobs. And then the second thing is, how do we develop them so that we're putting our teams in a place to be successful for our customers and our partners, and really kind of breaking and rethinking what that always was for the new reality of this, less tenured workforce that you've attracted to your business.
I love that, yeah. So Marguerite, I want to go back to your, couple of your slides. You can tell us a little bit more about what you've got going on at the Chamber with some of the things you're doing.
So we have a part of our organization that's called CO that's specifically focused on small businesses. And we touch about 6 million small businesses a year. And we organize the content to help people start a small business, run their small business, and grow their small business. And so for today's panel, I had the team put together some best practices for recruiting and retention. They are at that link right there. And so if you are looking for tips, tricks, short articles on how to do all of that, have a look at that link right there. We have all kinds of free resources for small businesses to help you guys, for those of you who are running a small business, thrive.
Awesome, great. So I'd like to hear what kind of keeps you guys up at night. For me, it's my husband snoring or the dogs or my children coming in late because they're now older and they think that they have no curfew. So, but yeah.
That's a different panel.
That's a whole different panel.
One I'd like to have.
I know. Yeah. The second one's off to college soon, so then I don't know what they're doing. Then it's easier. But anyway, Ben, we'll start with you. What keeps you up at night with staffing or retention or?
I think it's probably just that the last piece that I referenced. I mean, I think it's like we ask a lot of our teams, and I think it's just how do you make that a more sustainable, better proposition in terms of, I said it earlier, like I don't want our teams to have to be heroes every day. How do we put them in a position to be successful?
Yeah.
I think that's a burden leadership has, and like there are times in the last 18 months that felt really uncomfortable because we haven't been our best, right? You're waking up to a world that wants more of what we have than we can simply do, and so it's just how do you make sure that you're putting your teams in a place to be successful?
Great. Yeah. Ellen, I know like to hear what you guys are doing to help with the staffing shortages within the travel and hospitality group there.
Sure. This was you, right? This next slide.
Oh,
This is
did I have the wrong
Marguerite's
one? Sorry.
So,
This is
no,
what
that's
happens
good.
when
Do you
I'm
want to
not
talk?
Macy.
Do you want? That's good. Do you want to talk a little bit about your culture drivers of the chamber?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great.
So on what keeps me up at night, since I'm the head of HR at the chamber, staffing obviously keeps me, retaining people, but also recruiting talent. We're going through a transformation at the chamber. We're really trying to transform how we meet our members where they are, how we attract new members, and with that we need new talent in order to do that.
Yep.
And so one of the things that I was talking about last night, I think I shocked one of the CEOs that I was speaking with about this, but we sort of turned recruiting upside down. And I have 2 recruiters, which is twice as many as we had when I joined. And they are looking for talent in LinkedIn, passive talent who are not looking for jobs. So one of the things I'm doing to respond to this workforce shortage that we have is let's find people who aren't looking for jobs. Let's sell them on the value proposition of the chamber, why we have a great culture, why we have a great purpose, and let's attract those people into the organization. And we've been doing that for about a year, and we reduced our time to fill from 98 days to 48 days. So my CEO and leadership team is pretty happy about that. The downside of that is, people in adjacent industries are getting their talent poached, but that's helping us. And then the other thing that we're doing to kind of lean in on staffing is one of the things that Ben was talking about, which is culture and focusing on culture. And some things that we talked about earlier today is hearing from our customer, like from the organization standpoint, which is our employees. So we did a very thorough survey at the end of 2022 to ask, like, what makes you stay here? Why did you come here? What would make you happier here? And we really came up with sort of 6 culture drivers that we now are action planning around. And the culture drivers are purpose. People really want to stay in organizations where they believe in the purpose, as you mentioned, and where they feel the purpose every day and they see how their work aligns to the purpose. Belonging, collaboration, communication, another thing we were talking about earlier. leadership and management, building the skills of our leadership so that they know how to do all of this too, because every employee doesn't experience the organization the same way. It sort of depends on how they're experiencing it with their team and their manager. Recognition and feedback, learning and development for the entire organization, and then finally well-being. Burnout was the biggest word up there, and so we've really focused on a well-being campaign for our employees.
And just to jump in on that, I mean, I don't know how many of you in your organizations actually survey your own teams about, you know, kind of what is it like to work for your business. If you don't, I highly encourage you to do it. I would not recommend reading the free-form comments on a Sunday night. I would save that for a Monday morning.
Yep.
But it is like so much of what we do,
You
like
get so
you're
much
data-oriented,
information.
like
Yeah.
find out what's great, you know, don't mess that up, reinvest into it, find out the things that aren't so you can react to it. Look, we do it for customer surveys, right? All our organizations think of it. Take that same discipline and focus and put it on your own teams as well. It's a huge, you know, kind of part of the journey, you know, certainly for us in making sure that, hey, we know it's not perfect.
Yep.
What do we need to work on? And let's
Absolutely.
make sure we're listening to the folks that
Yep.
that matter.
That matter, absolutely. Ellen, what keeps you up on staffing?
What keeps me up is I'm fairly new to my role, as I mentioned. I've been there since February. Our CEO is also new to his role. He's been there since Labor Day, so 7 months and 4 months. And for us, it's a lot of the kind of culture conversation and the burnout conversation. We've got a great team that got the organization through the pandemic. We're a very healthy, strong organization, but travel is changing and evolving. And so how do we honor what many people in the organization went through for the last 3 years and also inspire and excite them to continue to change and evolve into where we want to go next? That has been, there's a balance that we need to find there that kind of keeps me up at night as I think about that.
Look, I think the work-life balance conversation is, I'm sure, something that all of you are feeling personally, and I know all of your organizations are probably wrestling with it. But it is this idea of like, it's not, you know, work-life like one's good, one's bad. Work's bad, life's good. How do I get more good, less bad? They both need to be good. And so kind of engaging with your organization on how does that become what your place is all about. Yes, you need life, you need that balance. But work should also be a good part of that equation for your team members as well.
Absolutely. I know we only have about a minute left. Wanted to just, hear from you what some of your diversity efforts are at your organizations. Anything different or changed in the last couple of years?
So I can talk about sort of best practices that I've seen over my career. So what research shows and what I've seen in my career is that diversity, equity, and inclusion programs are most successful when they're owned by the entire organization. So not just owned by the CEO or just owned by the head of HR, but everybody in the organization, that you're measuring, you have metrics and you're measuring it over time, and that you build what you're doing into your business cycle and into your sort of your talent cycle. And those are the programs that work best. The other thing that I have seen in the legal industry, which is one of the industries I've worked in, is we signed on to a challenge. We said, and we told all of our, our peers this, and we told our customers this, we will have 30% of our promotion candidates and our hiring pool be diverse over an entire year period. And we're gonna sign on the dotted line, and we're gonna do that. And you wouldn't believe how the entire organization just rallied around that. And one of the things that I learned doing my research for today, because as I mentioned before, I haven't grown up in this industry, but some of the things that I think you all could do if you're interested in this is I noticed that the Trade Show Executive launched an Inclusion and Diversity Task Force in 2021. So that's something that your organization could get involved in. Another thing I read is that the International Association of Exhibition and Events launched a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And just making a statement tells your customers, tells your employees, and tells your partners that you're serious about it and you're committed. So that's sort of what I've seen in my career.
Excellent.
I think those are great, both great examples, and I don't have anything to add in terms of the internal elements. One suggestion I would make to folks in this room, U.S. Travel is really focused on making sure that the association community is diverse and that we've got a good pool of talent coming into the trade association space. We are kind of a founding partner with ASCE on an initiative they've launched called Ready Me, which is intended to help people who are in organizations with diverse ethnic, racial, gender backgrounds and identities advance in opportunities in the trade association space. And so it provides a lot of mentorship, education. Those of you in trade associations who are interested, I'd encourage you to reach out to ASCE because I think that's a very unique program that will help us diversify what is, in some cases, has some areas for improvement, let's just say.
And just maybe one last strategy that has worked for us, like focusing on the business resource groups inside your communities. Encore now has 8 business resource groups of different communities and allies, and they have been, to your point of having the organization own it, like they have been the best at bringing ideas in terms of how do benefit plans need to evolve, how does our community engagement need to evolve. We've actually stood up, kind of an industry initiative to attract more female technical talent to the industry, not for Encore, but how do we turn our training, kind of make it public for people who may be considering a career in the industry. And so those business resource groups can be incredibly powerful inside your business of kind of bringing those ideas and then kind of driving it through the business.
That's great. Yeah, we've always had a goal of hiring more people of color. We now keep track of those. We report those demographics to the board, so it keeps a spotlight on it. But we also have an internal DEIB committee that focuses on things like marketing for diversity, website accessibility. We've redone our websites for to meet the needs of our folks there that use them, diversity speaker rosters, things like that. So I think there's obviously always more to be done.